Billy Mawasha, where are you? Hey, come, bring your people. The remaining present, sir, please, can you get your terminology right?
We're not on shutdown, Bernard.
You're not on shutdown yet?
Yeah, yet. Am I allowed to sit next to you?
Yeah, if you behave.
Not allowed.
If you behave.
I'll just kick you under the table if you don't ask the right questions.
I think you've lost a panelist.
No, all my panelists are here. How are you, Hulisani? Good, welcome. Mpumi, how are you? Good, welcome. Ali, how are you? Good to see you.
Listen, if you're going to run for a public
Dipak
office,
is also here.
if you're going to run for public office, you can canvass votes later. Let's have a conversation.
We're still waiting for Dipak to come, Bernard. You know, I'm very homely. We have to welcome our panels, make them feel welcome. Then we can ask the tough questions.
There's also a Sundown supporter with a toothache, so I'm not sure what else to make of it. Over to you, Billy. You know the game?
No problem.
And then there's questions at the end.
No problem. Thanks, Bernard. Good afternoon, everyone. The toothache is sorted out, Bernard, so I can express myself this week. Welcome, everybody. Interesting conversations so far. I think we've heard about different parts of this value chain. We've engaged with it from different elements, and I think it's important we also hear a perspective of our investors and people that operate in the money space. I was quite tempted, Bernard, to ask you to play the Show Me the Money clip from Jerry Maguire. Then I thought my panelists wouldn't be too happy. In terms of the panelists we've got here, we've got Dipak Patel, who's the head of Climate Finance and Innovation at the South African Presidential Climate Commission. Welcome. We've got Mnisi, who's the senior deal maker, Energy and Power SBU at the IDC. We've got Hulisani Neswiswi, Managing Director, Trilemma Impact Investments. Welcome. And we've got Nompumelelo Makhoba, CFO Fraser. So let's get into it, ladies and gentlemen. Dipak, I'll start with you. I mean, there has been a lot of conversations, a lot of shift in opinion in recent times, in particular, especially with the Trump administration coming in. I mean, what's the general sentiment and what's the feeling around investment in coal, investment in energy transition, from where you sit?
Thank you. Thank you for starting with me. Bernard will remember from last year that we weren't sure whether I was going to be invited to this coal and energy transition day ever again. Let me start off by saying, without becoming, let's just say, geopolitically sensitive or combative, that what we're seeing in the world as a result of the shift, particularly in the United States, is obviously, in my opinion, a short-term global shift towards perhaps a degree of resistance to undertaking a transition. And I think that's important to say because all of the science is still pointing to the need for a sustainable transition, whether that be in energy or, as we heard previously, whether that be in the transport sector. What this might do, and I'm willing to concede that, although my starting point would be climate response and reduction on a sustainable basis of our emissions profile, that we might have in the very near short term some advantages, which I think it would be foolhardy if corporates who are involved in that sector did not take advantage of. Having said that, I think the rest of the world still continues with their climate responsiveness, even against what appears to be headwinds. And in South Africa, if we take our cue just from what is happening in the rest of the world, I think we must use this period to consolidate what we have, to bank whatever additional opportunity might exist both in the domestic and the global markets with respect to our own natural endowments, which might mean coal, and maximize on that while ensuring that in the rest of our political economy, we in fact hasten the transition rather than slow it down.
Okay, welcome back. You got invited, and I mean, I think some of the points you make are fair in terms of it being short term, but I think a lot of it gets influenced by where does the money go, because we've got to balance different factors, right? And Hulisani, this is why I bring you in. I mean, how are investors currently balancing the energy trilemma, excuse the pun, of energy security, affordability, and sustainability, in particular in countries like us that are endowed with coal, as Dipak reminds us?
No, Dipak is actually correct. I think South Africa, it's not that we're necessarily, in love. I think we're trapped in coal, and that's really rich coming from me because I am the MD of the FSP within our group, but we essentially are a mining group, and most of our revenue still comes from coal. So we're also still trapped in coal. I don't think it's something that we can leave as a matter of philosophy or because we're taking a sustainability-driven approach. I think it's going to come down to us being very realistic about the numbers, the obligations to stakeholders outside of our immediate institutions. That is obligation to local communities, which still rely quite heavily on mining and related. So I think that the trilemma around sustainability, it's not going to be a quick fix. If I were to be, I think, realistic, I'd say it's going to take us about 10 to 15 years to ease up on the coal, and that's actually being driven by the reduction in the funding support for new coal assets, right? So it's not because there's not a lot of coal still to be mined, it's just the external factor and the push factor from the money is causing us to decline a lot of potential coal assets. So that's what's going to take care of the sustainability aspect. With regards to energy, the energy need, I think that in South Africa it's well established. I think now we seem to be a little less under pressure, but I don't think it's because we found a sustainable way to balance our energy needs. So again, that's also an area that's under severe pressure. I think the solution to that one is to take the burden away from your big stakeholders being government and even large commercial. The best thing that government can do is to actually put the onus on micro users, which in my opinion is the household and micro enterprises. And quite unironically, I feel that the most recent decisions around that have been a little counterintuitive. In the sense that government has essentially said, yes, we absolutely want you to become more renewable. It takes the burden off the grid. It takes the burden off of our existing supply. However, we're now making it slightly more complex for people to make the switch or sustain the switch. We've received on our energy unit several complaints from commercial as well as retail users, which is your household users, around the new requirements for them to register new systems, etc. So we're helping, and then we're kind of not helping. And then on the financing side, that's where I think there is some creativity being explored around financing the projects that are now sustainable. And there's a lot of interest. I always feel like government is kind of so fad-driven, because now the interest is around your very new technology. So that's hydrogen, and that's your waste to energy. And we've done a lot of feasibility studies around this. So these technologies do have real application in our world, even now, to varying degrees. I don't think we're at the place where hydrogen can replace any meaningful energy contributor to our consumption base. But I do think that people and organizations who have the resources and the money, they should definitely invest in it, because it's not going away anytime soon, okay? However, it becomes an internal efficiencies debate where you're going to balance your current financial performance obligations with the need to innovate. And the problem is, I foresee that businesses that don't do that, they will be left out, okay? Because when the growth happens, it will be accelerated for various reasons. But I think any business that has, or organization, and I'm going to count the government as an organization for the purposes of this discussion, but any entity that has a stake in this, we really need to balance between current efficiencies financially and exploring sustainable ways to diversify and bring in sustainable baseload electricity technologies.
No, thanks, Hulisani. And it's always a difficult thing to try and find a fine balance between all of that. But Ali, where you are sitting, you must see a lot of applications coming. And I mean, even Dipak admits that there is a resurgence around coal. I mean, what are you seeing from an investment perspective? Are people knocking down the door and really bringing in projects from a coal perspective, but also from the broader view in terms of energy transition?
Look, from our side, we're not necessarily seeing a lot of sort of new applications for coal But what we are seeing is we're seeing more consolidation, in the space. I think, as she mentioned, there is a recognition that there aren't as many sort of facilities or money to go into coal. So there is that recognition, and I think given where we come from, that's what we've been seeing. But coal remains a critical mineral, and our energy generation, as you know, I mean it's heavy coal, and the decommissioning of coal-fired power stations has been slowed down, so it's not going to go down very quickly. So based on that, and given that Eskom will always need more coal for their own capacity, we are seeing some, and we do entertain those applications that do come through. But we look at them on a case-by-case basis, each one of them on its own merit, because even though we are an extension of, we're an extension of government, we need to balance energy security, and then also balance it with the commitments that the country has made on different fora regarding transitioning to more greener sources of of energy. So when I say we look at it on a case-by-case basis, you need to balance those two. But it would be foolhardy to think that you're going to replace coal to the extent that that it is very quickly. So one needs to do it in a just manner, and that's what we are seeing, and that's how we're trying to balance it. More guided by what the IRP is saying, and we're seeing changes and shifts from previous versions to the one that is being that is out for for comment. So that tends to guide a lot of what we do and how we then commit resources to different sources of energy, for the generation fleet.
Nandi, thanks very much. Every time I listen to Eskom, including today, they're still buying coal, right? And then if you listen to the banks, they all tell you, we don't really fund coal. Just to put you on a spot half a second, IDC still funds coal projects.
We do fund coal projects, but as I said, on a case-by-case basis. Yeah, so we can't say wholesale. One needs to look at also, the transition path of an entity that is approaching, the IDC. So we not only have a mandate in SA, we've got a mandate on the continent.
Of course.
And when we go onto the continent as well, we need to look at what are their commitments, what are they, what is their path towards more sustainable sources of electricity, and you need to fund it within that framework.
Within that context. Sure. No, I understand. I wasn't trying to put you on the spot, but I did know some people were thinking about that question, right? Mpume, please help Ali there. I mean, you are a service partner to the industry as Fraser Alexander. You see different projects that come through yourself. What kind of projects are you seeing being funded and executed? And I mean, are there different alternative technologies? And I mean, we know the whole spectrum: solar, wind, hydrogen, biomass, etc. What have you seen in recent years from where you sit?
Sure. No, thank you very much, Billy. And if you'll allow me, I'll answer your question from the back to the front. I think it's very important to paint a picture first so that you can understand why this particular topic is very important to us as a service partner. So first of all, as a business, as Fraser Alexander, we've actually had to evolve over time. So have we seen changes? We've seen changes within ourselves. We've had to evolve over time in terms of being a leader, in terms of mine waste transformation, in terms of economic contribution, as well as in terms of contribution to the green economy. And what does that mean, and how have we been able to do that? And it's through this particular discussion is that we are involved in mineral processing. What does that mean? It means that we work hand in hand with our clients in washing the coal. And in washing the coal, we are contributing to a greener economy in a sense, because you remove impurities, you have lower emissions. And through the funding that we are discussing, we've been able to leverage our balance sheet to be able to provide that funding. So have we seen a change in terms of funding for us? It's a yes or no, a yes and no answer. And the no, first of all, is that with all the projects that we've brought to the banks, we haven't been rejected in terms of providing funding for building those projects in terms of coal wash plants. In terms of yes, the discussions have changed, Billy. It's no longer how it was before. The banks have limits in terms of coal limits, in terms of time, when they can provide those fundings until when, and also limits in terms of value, which is very interesting. So a percentage of the loans that they can provide in terms of the coal projects. So we have seen a shift in the discussions. Also, the banks now want to understand what is our contribution into the environment. And obviously, it's easy in terms of the coal wash plants. We can demonstrate that. And also, we operating the only fine medium separation plant in South Africa. So we've been able to do that, which means that it hasn't been that difficult to obtain funding. But will it always be easy? Time will tell, and because we're working with the banks, and I like their approach in terms of their policies, is that they haven't completely said cut coal. Okay. So are we seeing coal projects? Yes, we are seeing coal projects. They haven't cut it. They've done a transition, as I've mentioned, in terms of time, in terms of rand value as well. But if you just take a step back, what projects are being funded actually? It was interesting. I read one of the climate financial disclosure of one of the banks. I won't say the name so that I get invited next
But
year.
it's blue or green or red.
So that I get invited. And what's interesting, and I'm sure you would see that through the banks, right? Just to answer your question, where are you seeing the funding? What's interesting is they have committed 250 billion to sustainable funding up until 2026. That's the targets. And in 2024, they've met about 71% of that. And just talking about renewables, they've allocated 50 billion in terms of renewables. And already by 2024, they've achieved 84% in terms of that. And also when you look at the projected funding that they've planned, it's double the projected for 2026. So by 2028, they're saying about 500 that they would have contributed to that. And what's also interesting, they showed this graph in terms of showing the share of funding for renewable projects relative to non-renewable projects. And you can plot the graph. It's literally linear. So if you look at what is the share of renewable versus non-renewable in 2024, I think it's sitting at about 5.96. I stand corrected. In 2023, it was sitting at 5.16. In 2022, 4.16. So literally a linear. You can see where the focus is in terms of funding. But we haven't lost funding in terms of coal. It's been done in a responsible, transitional manner. As we know, that coal is very critical in terms of energy security for the short and medium term.
Well, I like how you know your numbers, like you know your technical terms. I'm very
accountant.
But you also know she knows the technical element. So what you're saying is we are seeing some money going into just energy transition, but we also know, Dipak, that Trump has come out and said the US doesn't believe in this drill, baby, drill, right? And they've cut money out of the JET funds. I mean, is there a mismatch between our climate ambition and available finance? And with the US pulling back, I mean, are the banks stepping in? Are there other players stepping in into that space?
Thanks, Billy. I'm going to try and impress you with some numbers as well. I want to get full marks and be invited back next year. Let me say that the 8.5 billion, and I was part of the team that negotiated that deal with what we call the International Partners Group. And just to refresh people's memories without taking too much of time, the International Partners Group was the US, the UK, France, Germany, the EU, and for an accelerated coal transition, 2.5 billion came from the climate investment funds. The reference to a slowing down of our decommissioning meant that we had to renegotiate that 2.5 billion, and the US actually opposed it in the first time that we went there. Whether they opposed it because we were South Africa or whether they opposed it because they wanted to drill, baby, drill, it was incoherent.
Which US? The Trump US or
The
the
Trump
Biden
US.
US?
The Trump
So
US.
this is the Trump stuff.
And after a lot of diplomatic, let's just say, gymnastics, we finally got them in the second vote to in fact, abstain. So they didn't say yes, they didn't say no. And the climate investment funds approved our delay of that decommissioning of 3 power stations that were in that plan to 2030 rather than start in 2027. I think this speaks to at a pace and scale that we can afford, given that we are focused on energy security while at the same time focused on access, affordability, and climate response. That's the first point I wanted to make. The 8.5 billion minus now the 1 billion portion of the United States should have taken us to 7.5 billion.
Yeah.
However, we're sitting at 12.6 billion.
Wow.
And we're sitting at 12.6 billion because there are other countries which were not part of the initial international partners group which have come into the picture.
With you.
Of course, how that money is packaged, structured, and how it flows is very complicated. And whether it will all flow or not, I remain, personally speaking, a little bit skeptical. But what it does say is that for pathways that are, let's just say, towards renewable and towards green, there is still concessional capital available. And I think that's an important point to bank. It's an important point to bank because that is readily available, leverageable, slightly more affordable funding. Let's not stare that gift horse in the mouth while we deal with the issue, as the President always reminds us, of a just transition which has embedded in it a scale and a pace that is relevant and good for South Africa. And so while my other colleagues might take a very strident view as to how quickly we need to go through the coal value chain decline, let's just say that even that is not according to our wishes, but according to market forces. And I always take the view that says market forces need to be predicted to the best extent we can predict, and we need to plan then in accordance. And I still see a decline, firstly, in the domestic supply and demand for coal as Eskom decommissions its power stations over the next 15 to 20 years, not because of emissions alone, but because the coal-fired power stations, the older ones, are coming to the end of economic life. And when we talk about clean coal, that's the last point I want to make, let's not forget that cleaning of coal is not just about washing, so that Eskom's boilers do not get smudged out. But clean coal is also about retrofitting Eskom's power stations, which we've now analyzed from a cost point of view, and it is not the least cost method of getting reduced emissions while generating power. And so how you triangulate and how you take a strategic, tactical, and implementable pathway to something that I believe in my heart of hearts is inevitable is really about policy, it's about corporate action, and it's about corporates. And we've seen it in both Seriti and Exxaro, beginning to get corporate longevity through diversification of their mix.
But even Eskom as well.
Even
And
Eskom,
even
yes,
Eskom.
No, you're right. I'm very impressed, Dipak, with your numbers. I've written them, all of them down. You've got a ticket for
but
next year.
I don't know if he was talking rands or dollars. So all those
It's all dollars, Bernard. Stay with the program, Bernard. I mean, Hulisani, listening to this, I mean, balance has been the word that has been floating through most of this. It sounds like you've got to do some financial gymnastics, use different instruments to really fund a project. I mean, give us a sense. What are you guys doing? What are you seeing? What are smart people doing in this space?
Yeah, that's such a good question. I think the one thing, when you want to speak to coal finance, renewable energy finance, any sort of energy finance, you always come back to what is my retail or consumer price. And for us, we have a very specific pricing environment where the price was pushed up quite rapidly over the past few years to a point where, if you look at where we are politically, it is unsustainable, and also economically for the average person, and including really large businesses who are also struggling to make the input cost of electricity make sense for their own operations. So it's not just the households that are suffering with the current electricity price. So I don't think that the planned hikes are going to be as easy to swallow for the country or the government anymore. Not that they have been in the past, but it's certainly going to get significantly worse. And harping on about the price point for the sale of electricity is where the entire coal and energy discussion starts and ends, because that's what you're working, you reverse engineer your way back from your input cost to mine the coal, treat the coal, put it in the power stations, generate power, transport the power to the end user, and the end user uses it. And when you have an environment where your price hikes are no longer going to be as easy to pass, but your input costs to supply keep rising with inflation or even above inflation, especially when you look at some of your newer technologies, you realize that we're actually heading for a very, very difficult energy and a very, very difficult coal environment for the industry. People who work in our industry and are realistic and actually, have a real relationship with the calculators, they'll tell you that the future is for coal and energy in South Africa is very, very tricky. We're in a really weird position where we don't produce the inputs to set up the plants, whether it's coal or not, so we import them at a dollar value. Our performance on that front is not doing really well. And then on the other hand, we have like a hard cap, I'd say, on the price that we need to fit all of this into by the time we're done modeling our models so we can get the financing and start construction of these plants. So when you look at those two factors, you realize that we're in for a tough time, which then comes to the question you asked, how do we solve it?
Yeah.
I think if you're super lazy, you're going to say, look, just make sure the price matches the input costs and call it a day. But in South Africa, that doesn't work. Our people don't have enough money. We have really high unemployment rates. I think it'll cause utter chaos and instability, and we can't have that. Which means then the only way for us to solve the solution problem is through very creative structuring models. And the only thing that will work right now, because from a banking side, we've had numerous discussions with various banking executives, and they don't have the experience in financing non-vanilla transactions. I think our colleague pointed out rightly that the only transactions that are being financed in coal are balance sheet transactions, and that's the bottom line. And the banks don't have the data because it's still new, like we've discussed. We're in a bit of a gap between technology types and all of those factors. So the banks don't have the experience to go further. They have the will, but they don't have the experience. So it's difficult for them to pass very creative solutions. So the only thing that I've seen that gives me hope for this coal and energy solution would be that the input owners, the project developers themselves, they use a combination of the balance sheet and working beyond their place in the value chain. So if you're a developer, typically you're just a developer. But the models that have worked and that will work going forward are those where the developer works with the manufacturer, works with the other stakeholders, and we have almost like a private equity structured ownership of the energy transactions for development, as opposed to the very old school purely balance sheet and bank finance transaction. So in short, if you're going to finance coal or renewable energy right now, because of where we are in South Africa and our economic environment, I would say that you've got to go private equity, and not traditional private equity where you go ask for money from a PE guy and he likes you so he'll give you the money. It's more like you got to structure it yourself. Okay, but I think if you do that, you will succeed. It'll take more time, but you'll definitely succeed.
No, thanks, Hulisani. I like the way you make reference to the banks, and luckily you're sitting next to a bank there. So Ali, I mean, this goes straight into you, right? I mean, have your approaches changed? I mean, if you listen to Hulisani, how we need to change, how we need to evolve. What are you guys doing within your bank? Because IDC is a bank, So maybe just give us a sense of how that has evolved and what are you guys doing and exploring?
Yeah. Look, I mean, from a financing of renewable energy, projects, yes, we've evolved. I think when the program started, so the IDC was a key, alongside the DBSA, were the key funders of the program. So meaning that we had to de-risk, the sector as it was growing. People were not necessarily sure whether the PPAs as they were signed were going to be performed, against by Eskom in particular. So in the earlier stages, we funded across the whole balance sheet, equity, debt, and quasi-funding communities, funding BEE in there. As the industry became slightly more mature and the banks started understanding the asset in themselves, then we started seeing more banks going in and us stepping a little bit back. But then we play more, as it relates to renewables, we play more on funding communities and funding BEE because transformation has to happen. And that's where we've played. Where we are right now is, I think we're not seeing as many renewable energy projects being funded as quickly as maybe they had been planned, owing to constraints like in the grid. And given where we come from with load shedding, gas has been identified as a transition, fuel.
Fuel, yeah.
Others argue it's a destination, fuel. So what we are starting to see and where we think we are more likely going to play a bigger role is, because we do need base load.
Yeah.
As the IDC, we are for industrialization, and energy security for us is key to unlock industrialization.
Yeah.
So that's where we are seeing the change and the shift in the next while, and I think the IRP also has got a similar expression. It requires more base load. As Dipak said, it's not because you are shutting down coal-fired power stations for the sake of it, but it's also because some are getting to the end of their own life, and they're becoming more and more reliable.
Yeah.
And when you wanna, so you want something that a technology that you're gonna bring in on stream that will give you base load, but then as quickly as you can, and gas does present that opportunity. So going forward, that's what we're gonna see. But we're also seeing interesting moves from Eskom in establishing their own renewable energy company.
Yeah.
I think they've got a great opportunity in the sense that whereas the private sector has got limitation on grid capacity, where their plants are located as Eskom, they don't have the same limitation. And we see that also as an opportunity for us as the IDC, maybe to play a role in unlocking that latent capacity that is sitting there to bring more base load, but also transition in a just way.
Yeah. No, thanks, Ali. And I think you mapped the landscape quite well. Obviously, over and above finding a balance, we're talking about transition, right? Trying to literally live in different worlds, right? The future and the current, right?
Sure.
And Mpumi, where you sit and you look at these projects, this uncertainty obviously means that you have to think about how you assess projects, how you assess studies. How are you guys thinking about that in terms of finding the funding, thinking about putting money in this uncertain world?
Sure. No, absolutely. So when we look at any project, we need to make sure that obviously we're allocating capital to the correct project.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I'll get fired. And how we do that, we actually do it in a structured approach as an investment committee. We would sit and have a risk matrix. Firstly, we need to make sure that in any project that we take, there's strategic alignment.
Yeah.
And we transform mine waste into economic, environmental, and economic value. So we need to make sure that in any project that we take, then what is our contribution to the project in ensuring that we are adding on to the greener economy, first of all. Secondly, what is our contribution in terms of social, and we'll rank that, right? What is our contribution in terms of social impact? In terms of in the communities that we're working in, are we able to do localization? And also in the projects that we are involved in, how many women will be part of that project and running that project, and women in leadership as well? So from a strategic point of view, it has to take up. And then secondly, obviously, financial feasibility. We look at the basics, right? Payback period. We need to make sure that the sooner in this uncertain environment, the sooner the capital is paid, the lower the particular risk. And obviously your IRs, your return on invested capital, but also very critical is ensuring security. What are the takeoff agreements? Are they certain? Has it been signed off? And what's the mix? I think in the earlier discussion we were talking about exports. What's the mix in terms of domestic output as well as export? Because the difference will actually have a bit of a risk involved. So we would weigh the projects like that in order to be able to determine which is the best projects that we can go forward and allocate funding to. And most importantly, can we fund those particular projects as well?
Sounds very thorough. I know we are out of time, but Bernard did steal 2 minutes of our time. So just coming back, I'm just going to ask one sentence, one short answer from your side, Mpumi. One biggest lesson you've learned in all of this. You sound to be doing it quite well. One big lesson for the people?
Strong commercial contracts. I'll repeat that again. Strong commercial contract is very critical. It's important for us to sort that out to protect ourselves, right? As a partner as well as the client, so it must be fair to both. So very critical. We need to sort that out when the marriage is good, because when the divorce comes, it won't
tough.
be great.
Spoken like an accountant, risk management. Ali, one short answer. If you had $1 billion to invest today, where would you put it in this interesting landscape we are dealing with?
Look, I would put it in renewables and gas to power, and also associated infrastructure to bring in more gas into the country, whether it's pipes or it's gas importation terminals. I think that's what we need in the next while.
So we need to add gas, Bernard, to the title of this day. So thank you, Ali. Hulisani, what should coal-dependent countries be doing right now to attract investor support? We are South Africa. We rely on, FDI. What should we be doing? One short answer.
I think we should be very realistic in terms of the market forces that we're dealing with right now. But I think that if you can show your global transition plan from coal to, let's call it beyond coal, because there are various energy outputs that we can use, then you will absolutely get the funding. I think that that's possibly the smartest way for anybody in the room who's in coal, even right now, if you need expansion capital or whatever. If you can show that transition from where you are right now to where you are after coal, then you become, from a risk perspective, a lower risk, because currently coal has so many questions. It is seen as a very high risk investment.
Okay, so have a plan to transition,
And
become
show it,
bankable, you'll get the money.
Yes, absolutely.
Dipak, what's your message to coal miners and investors? Again, one short sentence. Out there, everybody's keen to hear your wisdom.
One sentence might not be very short. Be careful that you don't plan on the basis of what you'd like the future to be, rather than what it is going to be.
That is very good and very
Be
short.
realistic. Wow, thank you very much. Thanks to the panel. I think the key words, and Bernard will ask some additional questions that have come through. For me, I'm hearing that we are living in transition. It's important to balance the need for current security and future sustainability. So thanks for those inputs, Bernard.
Yeah, I've got quite a few interesting questions. I wonder why some of them are to Mr. Patel. Really, it's like you come here, you stir the hornet's nest, and then we invite you back next year. The question doesn't come through that logical, but I think I get the logic. Does the Commission's negotiations for this renewable financing, is it guided by the IRP, or are you just raising as much money as possible to reduce the use of coal? It's quite a cynical question, but you hear where it comes from.
It's a multifaceted question.
Yeah.
Let me say that we sit in a very unique position in South Africa, where while it might appear that we have contradictory policies, it's in the marriage of what we call our nationally determined contributions, which sets our emissions commitment to the global community on the one hand, and our IRP, which takes a view about what the source energy is going to be for our energy system going forward. And it's in the confluence between our global commitments to reduce emissions and what the IRP says that I think the world believes us when we say that we will do this at a pace and scale that makes sense for us, but that we have the policy frame that convinces the world that we are serious about this. And so when we talk about raising global donor funding and concessional finance from the international community, it's not about giving away sovereignty. It's about having persuaded them that we're a capable country that can reconcile the trade-offs that need to be made. That's the first point I want to make. The second point I want to make is that we're not going to spend endless amounts of time and energy pursuing lower cost funding from the global community when we have a very strong domestic financial and capital market system in this country. We don't have enough time to go into it. But what I can say is that we've studied now what we believe to be climate finance flows, and 91% of climate finance that has flowed towards whether it be renewable, whether it be adaptation, the water sector, the agricultural sector, in the name of climate response, 91% is from domestic capital and financial market sources, largely banks in the first instance, but increasingly asset managers and life and pension funds as well.
Perhaps a quick question. Do you foresee, so we've got these commitments, but much bigger, these climate commitments, but much bigger economies like ours are adjusting them, walking away from them, withdrawing from the Paris Accord. You work you work looking backward, 30 years of democracy, one ruling party. Next election, that could be different.
Yeah.
Don't you do what you tell us not to do? Don't you wish for a future that may be different? Don't you plan for a future which is based on wishes? I mean, seriously though, do you foresee a scenario where we have a different country, we withdraw?
I'm not going to predict the outcomes of our next electoral cycle, whether that be local government or national and provincial. It's beyond my pay grade. I do have a view about what's going to happen. But what I do see happening, according to scientists, and we can see this in our daily lives, whether it's in our own country, floods on the eastern seaboard, whether it is heat waves followed by cold spells in other parts of the country, whether it is drought. What we're seeing now in Texas, what we're seeing now as the hottest summer on record in Europe, means that the writing is on the wall with respect to what the world is in fact likely
but
to
those
look
same
like.
facts, I do agree, but they're also in front of Trump.
I'm not going to comment on
Okay.
rationality
No,
versus irrationality.
Yeah.
But what we do know is that the United States, through its own electoral processes, saw a withdrawal previously from the Paris Accord and then a quick re-entry
Every 4
into
years,
the Paris Accord. Is this presidency going to sustain beyond its 4-year cycle? I can't predict.
But the damage may, unfortunately.
I think the damage is going to be done, and we'll have to
I
pay
don't
in
want
future
to only be rude
generations.
to you, I also want to be rude to the IDC. So, I mean, this gas, I mean, gas is not clean. So why are you funding gas?
Yeah.
I mean, really, this is a step backwards.
No, look, gas is not clean, but gas is cleaner than coal. I mean, I think when you take a journey to
It depends
transition,
on what methane you measures where and so on. But okay, let's tolerate that statement and
Yes,
then
yeah,
build on that.
yeah. I mean, so when you're on a journey to transition, I mean, you can't make you can't make a drastic change. So it is gradual, and I think gas does provide us that opportunity to gradually. I think they do say that it emits more than half the emissions that coal does. So you can see in itself, it already gives you, a big drop in emissions, and then it allows you also then to keep on adding renewables, which further then reduces your, your emissions. So it's a journey. So.
Ladies and gentlemen, I deliberately push. I think that is the crux. The conversation today, as opposed to 5 years ago, is we all acknowledge it's a journey. We come at it at different angles. We come at it with different urgencies. I think we are too slow, a little bit there. I think we should be faster, but at least we are on this journey to adjust energy transition. So whether that's gas next or not, the market in the end will determine some of these things. So I really appreciate the conversation, Billy.
Thank you.
You can herd cats, huh? I mean, these people are all over the place, and you make them sound intelligent. They may even be invited.
They're very intelligent.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much.
very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, colleagues.
Thank you.
We are
Always good
breaking
seeing you.
for
Thank
tea. It's a short tea break, so go queue for your coffee. Thank you very much.